In theory at least, building on a previous success and standing on the shoulders of giants, exploiting pre-established feelings, seems like it should be a shortcut to a big win at the box office. Unfortunately, this has been true enough times that movie remakes are happening around the clock. And despite rarely ever recapturing the magic that made the originals so popular in the first place, the trend shows no signs of slowing down or stopping. You could argue that rebooting any franchise is a lazy and uninspired idea, but these efforts in particular, all currently in different stages of production, are on another level entirely. So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are 9 upcoming remakes nobody wants. Number 9, the Garfield Movie. Garfield the cat is one of those characters that everyone knows, and has enjoyed popularity for a long old time. It's been almost 5 decades since the ginger cat made his first comic strip appearance, but is anyone really asking for another Garfield film in 2024? It's been 20 years since Bill Murray first voiced Garfield in a role he famously regretted. And while the trend for studios right now is playing on nostalgia and reviving old franchises, it's hard to see the new iteration hitting the mark on any level. To its credit, it has an impressive cast, boasting the likes of Chris Pratt, Samuel L. Jackson, Hannah Waddington, Nicholas Hoult, and Ving Rhames, among others. But even taking this into account, there isn't much to get excited about really. On top of a certain amount of potential audiences feeling something of Pratt fatigue, the trailer offered no compelling reasons to part with your hard-earned money. Every single joke fell flat, and it just screams of rebooting a franchise for the sake of it. Now I know this may be a list talking about these upcoming remakes that we're not exactly excited for, but on a more positive note, I want to know, what is your favourite remake of all time? There must be some good ones out there, right? Let me know in the comment section down below. Number 8, The Crow. First released in 1994, The Crow has grown to be something of a cult classic in the years since, and has a loyal following of fans. To say that many of those folks were annoyed at seeing the first look at the reboot would be one hell of an understatement. It wasn't just fans of the originals that were underwhelmed either. This stretched to the mainstream after the shockingly bad reception to the first image of Bill Skarsgård as Eric Draven. It's the kind of criticism that saw Sonic the Hedgehog's design completely re-evaluated. Though naturally it's a different scenario with a live-action character. It's not just the aesthetic missing the mark or the fact that reboots are usually received with skepticism at the best of times. Director of the original Alex Proyas has passionately spoken previously about how The Crow is a part of Brandon Lee's legacy and should be respected enough to be left alone. Lee played the titular role in 1994 and was tragically killed during production. The only reason Proyas finished the film was to honor the man he said brought that character to life and made it into his own. From the offset, this film has a huge mountain to climb. Number 7, The Naked Gun. Seth MacFarlane and Liam Neeson have worked together on multiple occasions in the past, with the Taken star appearing in MacFarlane's A Million Ways to Die in the West, featuring in a brief cameo in Ted, and even showing up as himself in an episode of Family Guy. The latest collaboration between the two is set to be a reboot of The Naked Gun, with Neeson starring and MacFarlane producing. The original trilogy of movies was based on the Police Squad TV show, and featured the classic and unmistakable comedic chops of the late great Leslie Nielsen. Nielsen brought a very specific style of comedy to the likes of The Naked Gun and Airplane that only he could. And it's hard to imagine anyone taking this franchise on and making it work, much less Liam Neeson. Nielsen's genius simply cannot be recreated, I'm afraid. No disrespect to Neeson himself, who has shown off his comedic chops on several occasions, but it's just impossible to picture him as Detective Frank Drebin. The Naked Gun is silly, it's outrageous, and no matter who steps into the role, it's a thankless task that will likely be without reward. Number 6, Blade. San Diego Comic-Con was huge for Marvel Studios in 2019, that's 5 years ago now if you're counting, as Kevin Feige laid out the future of the MCU's Phase 4 following the buzz of Avengers Endgame. There were some massive announcements that came in Hall H, but the big mic drop at the end of the presentation was the confirmation that Mahershala Ali would be playing a rebooted version of Blade. Naturally, there was a lot of excitement at the time of the announcement, But half a decade has passed without the film materializing, and now the feeling toward both the project and the overall MCU in general isn't quite the same. Though Ali's voice has been heard in an Eternals post-credits scene, Blade himself is no closer to appearing on screen than he was when he stepped on stage in San Diego. Production on the MCU Blade reboot has been hampered with issues, including rewrites and changes in director. With this in mind, paired with the expectations thanks to how highly regarded Wesley Snipes' version of the character is, Blade's chances of success are only growing slimmer. Thanks to the MCU going through arguably its roughest rough patch ever in recent years, the franchise is reportedly shifting focus back to quality over quantity. And at this point in time, unfortunately, it doesn't seem as though Blade fits into this new strategy. Cheers for watching this video today, friends. Hit that subscribe button down below for more What Culture on your screen. Number 5. The Thing. For a movie to be rendered as a classic takes something utterly special, and to still be talked about and to be relevant over 4 decades later is damn near impossible. However, what John Carpenter, Kurt Russell and co did with The Thing back in 1982, which was itself a remake of the Howard Hawks produced The Thing from Another World, ticks both of those boxes, baby. Of course, the ambiguous ending in which it's never revealed if either Childs or MacReady has been assimilated by the titular alien is always a strong talking point, but it's so much more than that. The Thing is one of the most influential horror films of all time, a seminal text that reiterates why John Carpenter is seen as the master of horror. There have been unofficial sequels, there have been video game spin-offs, and in 2011 there was even a reboot prequel starring Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Joel Edgerton. Absolutely nothing has been able to recapture that same magic that made The Thing an eventual classic, however, and it's impossible to believe that a second attempt will have any better chance than the first. Even taking into account the fact that Carpenter will be involved in this potential new project, which was first reported in 2020, there is still no good reason that can be given for producing yet another remake, or as has also been rumoured, a sequel. This is the epitome of a classic that just needs to be left alone. Number 4. Scarface. Whether from the outside a movie reboot seems like a good idea or not, there surely has to be a certain point where it's agreed that it's just not gonna happen. If something has been in development for 13 years and is no closer to hitting the big screen, it's probably time to cut your losses and move on to something else, right? This is exactly the case with Universal's reimagining of Scarface. Since 2011, there have been 4 different directors attached to the project, as well as 6 different writers, which makes it hard to see how, even if it does get made, it could ever really work as a cohesive project. As said before, this would be the case with any movie, but a remake of a classic like Brian De Palma's Scarface? Maybe this is a sign from the universe saying that there is absolutely no reason to try and recapture this same magic, as it's just not gonna happen, is it? Granted, there is a little irony in the fact that 1983 Scarface is itself a remake of the original from 1932, but this is very much an exception to the rule. No one else could play Tony Montana like Al Pacino, and no matter how it is approached, it will never emerge from such a shadow. Number 3. Halloween. Since its debut in 1978, Halloween has become one of those franchises that can boast more bad movies than good ones. Of the 13 entries in the series, a staggering 9 have earned rotten scores on Rotten Tomatoes from both audiences and critics, and yet still it moves on. It doesn't help that there have been multiple reboots, soft reboots, and alternate timelines, making it difficult for even the most stalwart of fans to properly follow. Now, after 13 films and with the latest trilogy having concluded with the divisive Halloween Ends, it feels as though there is nowhere else for the story to go. However, Miramax TV has found a way, of course. Yet another Halloween reboot. Even with 5 different versions of the Halloween timeline already at play, a TV series is reportedly now in production that will return back to the origins of the franchise, but as a complete creative reset. Essentially, what this means is that it will ignore the recent movies entirely and create yet another separate story branch to follow. At this point, you have to wonder who still thinks this is a good idea. Number 2. Moana. Moana is set to join the likes of fellow princesses Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, Belle, Mulan, and Ariel in Disney live action in 2025. Moana is arguably one of the best Disney princesses out there, and her first outing is genuinely outstanding. What can I say? It is. However, it only released in 2016. While some of the rebooted movies have brought into the 21st century some of the more dated Disney stories and characters, there is no reason to recreate something that is not even a decade old. Audiences love Moana. Recently, Moana 2 was surprisingly revealed with a release date of November 2024, which will see the return of the titular character alongside Maui the demigod. This has the potential to be a wonderful continuation of a strong character and story, but it does go even further in making the live-action version feel completely redundant. It would be bad enough to release a reboot just 9 years after the original, but within 12 months of the animated sequel just doesn't make any sense, and runs the very real risk of audiences becoming bored with the character. Number 1. Harry Potter. Both the Harry Potter novel series and the big screen adaptations are still, decades after their respective releases, ridiculously popular, and yet a reboot is being planned. Currently in production at the Warner Brothers owned HBO, the novels will soon be adapted into a TV series, and it's difficult to see it coming anywhere close to the movies. No matter who is ultimately cast, it feels as though the shoes of Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, Michael Gambon, Alan Rickman, and Robbie Coltrane will prove too big for another live-action adaptation to overcome. Unlike many of the entries on this list, there are at least understandable reasons for looking at a reboot here. Namely, the movies were forced by nature to leave out so much of the source material that a TV show could potentially include. However, even potentially seeing Peeves and Spew doesn't seem like enough of a reason to move forward with this, really. But a return to Hogwarts, this time on the small screen, will seemingly very much be a thing soon enough.